Okay, next question. Yes, sir, and then you, sir, and then the chap at the back, and then I think we're done. So if we could keep it snappy, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. Yeah.
I managed to get the toy. Peter Williams from Surrey. A couple of observations for Stephen. First of all, I wish the Home Office wouldn't use this awful word mandation. My experience in the private sector was far better if you encouraged it rather than mandated it. I think mandation will bring all sorts of resistance. The second thing is, on this extension of independence, you found a way when the magistrates were being done away with, and mysteriously we all got an extra 6 months or a year. So I can't see why the same thing can't happen leading up into where we're going. The third thing is a question on funding, which I would like to have asked the Minister, but I'll ask whoever's going to answer it, and that is there going to be tampering with the funding formula in the allocation of grant now? We've fought for years about this. Somebody talked very sensibly about doing away with CLG. Yes, what a good idea. But we fought for ages over this argument, and I'm sure 43 people in here from different authorities can make 43 different arguments on the funding. This is not the time to start fiddling with the edges of it in the current allocation of grant.
Okay, I'll ask the Minister to address that in his closing remarks. Let's take both the last 2 questions together, and then we'll wrap up. One here, and then there was a chap at the back. That's right, yeah.
Thank you, Kit. Brian Greenslade, APA Board, Devon Cornwall Police Authority, and the Lib Dem lead on the Association of Police Authorities. Stephen, you kindly mentioned Chris Hoon when you spoke. Chris Hoon also said previously he thought elected commissioner proposals were a dangerous idea and that the last thing British police need is an elected sheriff leading the shootout at the OK Corral. But I won't ask you to comment on that. The question is, given that sort of concern from a senior coalition figure and much other public concern, do the panel not agree that there should be a fully costed business plan presented before the proposals are considered by Parliament, which set out the reasons for the changes, the benefits expected, the cost, with a risk assessment? So far, I think government have not indicated they're going to do this.
I'm going to ask the Minister to address that as well in a minute. And then our final question at the back.
Ian Francis, Warwickshire Chair, and follows on very much from Brian's point just now. In the last 2 sessions, we've heard much about the introduction of commissioners, the introduction of crime panels and so on. There are clearly cost implications. As a taxpayer, I would have expected the government to have fully costed all these potential outlays, but bringing that back to us as individual authorities, here we are moving well on the way to setting next year's budget, notwithstanding the additional data we need from the allocation following the CSR. But we're not just looking at next year's budget. We're looking 2 or 3 years ahead. We must. Can somebody tell me what information is going to be made available to us regarding these costs through transition, when and where it is going to be coming from?
Stephen, do you want to take that?
Yeah, shall I pick up a handful of those? Firstly, I should say I agree with Peter about mandation. We have spent a very significant number of years encouraging forces and authorities indeed to take collaboration more seriously and make more active progress on it. We are now in extremely tough times. It remains our position that we would always prefer to see willing collaboration, and particularly around procurement. We have not made that progress over the last few years. The narcissism of small differences remains a besetting sin in policing, and I think the government now in very tough times is saying where we have to mandate, and that will always be a very careful judgment, that's what we will now do. But I agree with you, there's a sequencing issue there, but frankly we are getting quite close to the end of waiting for encouraged collaboration. So that's the first point. Second point is lots of questions about when's the information and the detail coming. On funding, the Minister will no doubt say more in a moment, but we will be announcing very shortly, and we've said this to colleagues over the last few weeks, the force level allocations. They will be alongside the local government settlement, and they will come very shortly. We said early December, and we meant early December, and Peter's points again about the balance between winners and losers, or the many ways in which you could tweak the funding formula, you could think about damping, all that stuff. We will set out very clearly what our approach is, as I say, in a very few days. Third point, costs in terms of the police and crime commissioners. As the Minister said in his remarks, at the very last minute indeed, in the spending review, the Chancellor said we would have formally another £50 million, quite separate from the money already negotiated by the Home Secretary for the day-to-day business of policing, to fund elections. Of course, in the end, it all comes into the figures for policing, because that's what it is, but we would not have had that 50 million if we did not have this policy to implement, so that is on top of the money for officers and PCSOs. It remains our view, and we will say this when we publish the bill, when there will indeed be an impact assessment and a costed analysis of the proposals, that it remains our view that for the day-to-day business of police and crime commissioners, we do not expect it to cost materially more than the current costs of police authorities. They are light-touch strategic governors of policing. They are not there to create huge armies of staff, and there will be a serious transparency framework around the choices they do make on how they support themselves. So that will be absorbable within what is currently spent on police authorities.
Okay.
That remains our view, but we're not going to prescribe the detail of that. Very last point, just to come back to Peter. No, Brian, I think it is, of course, excellent when opposition politicians bring the very best of their thinking into government and leave the rest of it behind.
Okay, thank you. Okay, did you want to say anything, Hugh?
I'd just say something on costs. HMIC said that the cost of police authorities in 08-09 was about £65 million. So the current system is not cost-free. Of course, there are additional costs with elections. The APA did some research, or commissioned some research that suggested the additional cost of police and crime commissioners over 5 years would be £100 million. I just think that that's contestable. I think the analysis presumes over 5 years, potentially on that basis, 2 elections. We know that police and crime commissioners are 4-year terms, so 2012 and 2016. So you can game the figures that way and make it sound more expensive. I don't think the running costs of police and crime commissioners, because, as Stephen said, they are meant to be leaner, should be any more. And in fact, there's a good opportunity for them to be much less.
So Hugh?
I just very briefly on collaboration. I agree entirely. It should be a position of last resort, not first resort. And if you look at the air strategy, we're very nearly there. There's a reason for that. There are no boundaries in the air. It's easy to deliver. Collaboration is, frankly, bloody difficult when you've got so many people playing. We have 43 forces. That's not changing. So government has to understand that actually makes it quite complicated with 43 legal entities trying to negotiate in 43 different ways. That is not to say I sense any lack of will to do it. Final point on procurement. If I'm told any more that we've procured stuff 43 times, I will probably assault someone. I don't know of any chief that buys any car without referring to the national contract. Again, because of the legal entity of each individual authority, they have all sorts of bizarre, complicated ways of doing it. There is a huge amount of progress has been made on procurement, which we keep forgetting. There is more to do, I fully accept that, but we're not starting from a greenfield site, and it will not deliver huge savings in my professional judgment. But we will save on procurement because the chiefs will stop buying stuff.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's our Q&A session over. A big hand for the panel. It's been very interesting. Thank you very much.